All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women in Leadership, our online social event. Here in the BYU Management Society, we aim to accomplish three things: leadership, networking, and experience. My name is Olivia Hickson. I'm the Director of Women in Leadership for this semester, and I'll be your host today. The BYU Management Society is a worldwide network of business professionals. Our chapter is one of 90 in the world, and we're hoping to expand our network across the globe, really. So our committees include Women in Leadership, of course, that's where you are right now, My Leadership Story, Global Leadership Connect, Retention and Recruitment, and Marketing. This semester, we are completely online. Everybody knows that. It has been really kind of an exciting time to develop different skills and to host events online. We appreciate all of you guys, all of our members, and we encourage everyone to invite their friends to join BYU Management Society. We're looking forward to being in person in fall, so we'll see what happens then. But today we have our awesome event. This is going to be with Professor Roni Jo Draper, Roni Jo Draper, and we cannot wait to hear about her experience in research tonight. So right now, Helen Ta'anoa, a Women Leadership Committee member, she will say our opening prayer. Afterwards, Angela Morales, who is also Women Leadership Committee member, will introduce our speaker. I will introduce the rest of our event after Angela speaks, so Helen can say our prayer right now.
Our dearest Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this day that Thou hast blessed us with. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet together and be able to hear from Professor Draper today. Father, we're grateful for Thy many blessings, and we ask Thee to continue to bless us that we may be able to prepare our minds and our hearts for the things that will be discussed in our meeting today. We ask Thee to bless Professor Draper that she may be able to teach with Thy Spirit and be able to share her insights with us today. We ask for a blessing on those affected by the floodings in Hawaii, that they may be able to be safe and be able to recover. We ask Thee to bless our committee and those who will be joining us as well. We love Thee, and this is our prayer in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Roni Jo Draper is a professor in the David O. McKay School of Education at Brigham Young University, where she teaches courses in literacy, multicultural education, and women's studies. Her research interests focus on teacher education and the challenge of preparing teachers to create inclusive classrooms. In her recent work, she has turned to indigenous storytelling to share stories that center the lives of indigenous peoples. She has produced the film Scenes from the Glittering World about the in and out of school lives of three Navajo young people, which will premiere at the Atlanta Film Festival this spring. Dr. Roni Jo is also the writer and producer of the upcoming documentary Good Fire, which centers the lives of Yurok fire practitioners who are returning fire to the land. Additionally, Dr. Roni Jo works as an advocate for social justice in her community, where she serves as the chair of the board of the ACLU of Utah, the vice president of PFLAG Provo or PFLAG Provo, Utah County, and on the national board of the ACLU. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Roni Jo Draper.
Go ahead, Olivia.
Sorry, I just need to announce something really quick. Thank you, Helen and Angela. Just as Dr. Draper is speaking, I ask that everybody remain muted because we are recording this meeting just so we can have a good recording. I will be our discussion moderator tonight, so if you have any questions as Dr. Draper is speaking, please submit them through the chat feature, and then at the end, after she is finished speaking, I will be able to ask the questions directly to her. So Dr. Draper, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to be here. I want to I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge I'm coming to you from Provo, Utah, which is the ancestral land of the Shoshone, Ute, and Paiute people who were the original caretakers of this land, and I want to acknowledge that, and I'm excited that you all were able to gather sort of in this space virtually from all around the world, really. And I think that I hope that you take the time. I'm sure many of you are practiced in taking the time to consider the indigenous peoples upon whose land you also occupy. So I want to let people know that I'm certainly aware of that. I myself am an indigenous woman. I am Yurok. My father is a Yurok man. My mom was white, and the Yurok people are situated in Northern California, and the village where I am from, Wichpeck, is right at the fork of the Klamath and the Trinity Rivers. And so I introduce myself by way of that background, and by way of, so that people can understand my connection with the land, my relationship with the land. And then I'm here at BYU, where I've been for about 21 years, talking to young people about teaching and about how to really become the best kinds of teachers that they can be. In my former life, I was a high school mathematics teacher, so nerd alert on that one. But now I work with people who are becoming teachers, and I try to talk to them, or I do talk to them, about how they can strive to create classrooms that are inclusive of all kinds of kids and their families. And so I was just given like free reign to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about, which wow, that's dangerous. But here, so I decided that I would just talk about things that are really near and dear to my heart, and things that have been in the conversation that folks have been having in all kinds of institutions, all kinds of organizations and communities. And so I'm going to talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. A lot of companies, organizations, educational organizations, whatever, have created, and they have different names, but EDIB leaders or whatever, but diversity, inclusion, and belonging, or equity, diversity, and inclusion and belonging officers. And usually these folks are high-level folks within the organization. Maybe they report directly to the president, and they have sort of institutional power, although that sometimes that could be debated, to make sure that they're looking over the organization, the community, in terms of how they're doing with issues related to diversity, inclusion, and belonging. These positions have been relatively new. I would say maybe even within the last like 5 to 10 years, but they're really becoming quite popular now. I just saw on LinkedIn that Adobe is looking for an equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging officer. So they're becoming more popular. A lot of universities have them, hospitals, all kinds of institutions. And so, so I want to talk about what the term diversity means, what the term inclusion means, what the term belonging means as it relates to organizations. So, and I am happy, like, put questions in the chat, and I generally like to have these, have my presentations be more like conversation so that I know that I'm addressing the things that you're interested in, the things that you care about. But diversity is when we talk about diversity, when people talk about, we need diversity, or there is diversity, or we need to be more diverse, they're often using that word in lieu of using the word race. And so they'll say, they might even accuse somebody of being a diversity hire or whatever. We need more diversity in our company or whatever, but they may be just referring to race and acknowledging that there needs to be more Black people, Indigenous people, Asian people, Pacific Islander, Latinx, and just all other other peoples of color. And so certainly that's something that we can consider, that we think of, because it's something that we notice on people. We notice their skin color, their phenotype, what are the shape of their eyes, the shape of their nose, the shapes of their mouths, what kind of physical features they have. And then and that's something very noticeable. But then there are other things that we can think about in terms of diversity that have to do with any individual, including a person's gender, their gender expression, their sexuality, their ability, so those kinds of things that are sort of inherent in people are also factors of diversity as well. And then we may not address those as much, and sometimes they're not as obvious. Often gender is, but whether or not knowing somebody's sexuality, for instance, just by looking at them or speaking to them, is often not it's not something that is often revealed, or that it isn't necessary to reveal that. Same with abilities. Sometimes a disability can be really visible. So if somebody, say, uses a wheelchair or uses a walker or whatever, it might be easy for us then to notice, oh, this person is a person with a disability. But sometimes disabilities, including things like chronic pain or mental illness or learning disabilities or cognitive differences, sometimes are not seen on the outside, so that we can talk about them as invisible disabilities. And so these are things that can also lend itself to diversity and having a diversified environment. And we certainly attend to those things. Age, I should mention, is another deal, that when you're often in your university classrooms, those can be fairly non-diverse, because there maybe is only a spread of age of maybe like 4 or 5 years. And so we would consider that like a less diverse situation in terms of age. So anyway, we have all these sort of factors, but then there are other factors that have to do with diversity that may have to do more with people's life circumstances. So socioeconomic status, whether or not a person has a criminal record, educational attainment, professional experience, what jobs people have had, whether or not people have experienced trauma or whatever. And so there are those kinds of diversities as well that people have just by virtue of living. You grow up in different geographic places, and then you have diverse experience that is going to create, again, some differences of perspective. So when we look over an organization, if we look over that organization and we don't notice, I mean, we can measure diversity. We can do that simply by counting, simply by saying, who are these people? And if the overall population of the organization doesn't really reflect the general population that where we're drawing people from, then we would say, something is amiss. Somehow we're not really diverse as we ought to be. That something is happening that is not allowing access to the community, the organization, based on race, based on gender, sexuality, age, ability, whatever it is. So if I'm in, if I'm in a place, where 10% of the people in that area are peoples of color, then I would expect, just by virtue of statistics, just by virtue of just understanding how numbers work, that any organization within that same area would have about 10% of that population would also be peoples of color. That would be the expectation. And if it's not, if I've only got 1% or if I've got 5%, then I have to ask myself, what's happening in this organization that isn't allowing people of color to fully participate? Are there policies, practices, biases that are at play that are not making it possible for people from that general population to participate fully? So when we look at education, for example, teachers in public schools in K-12 settings tend to be primarily white, primarily middle class, and primarily female. And so that we would say, well, that's not, maybe that's not as diverse as we would like, especially because it doesn't reflect the population from where we're drawing teachers, and it may not reflect the population of the students and families that they serve. And so that we would just question, why is that happening? Furthermore, we would question, because when we outside of teachers, when we get into leadership positions within education, school principals, school superintendents, those positions tend to be filled primarily by white middle-class men. And we're drawing that those positions draw from the population of teachers. It's almost unheard of to be a school principal without first being a teacher and then going into a school leadership higher education program. And so then we have to ask ourselves, what is happening that it's more likely for men to take up those leadership positions than it is for women? We wouldn't say, well, maybe women aren't interested in leadership, because the very act of teaching a classroom full of students, you can start imagining the leadership qualities that are necessary for someone to take up that work. Organize, you're essentially organizing humans, making them do things to be productive, evaluating their work, giving feedback, helping people grow, managing conflict within the classroom, all the kinds of things that we would expect a good leader to do. That's what a good kindergarten teacher does. That's what a good high school mathematics teacher does. That's what a good PE teacher does. So that those are the things that we would expect to happen, and that we would expect that those folks would have the ability and also the interest in taking up leadership positions. The other thing so that has to do with diversity. So diversity, we can just count, we can just notice we're diverse, we're not diverse. When we look at organizations that are more diverse, have more diversity, not just across racial lines, but across all kinds of demographics, we find that those organizations tend to just do better. And not, and obviously they have to do work in order to make that diversity work. but in organizations that are interested in earning money, I'm in education, we're not really interested in earning money. That's not our bottom line. But in organizations that are interested in money, and measuring their success by money, time and time again, it is shown that they do better when they have more diversity. And that only makes sense because, when we're trying to solve problems, when we're trying to address issues, the more diverse minds and eyeballs we have on the problem, the better solutions we're able to bring. I'll give an example from medicine. In medicine, over the history of medicine has been dominated obviously by men and primarily by white men. And so one of the problems that we are experiencing now in medicine is that we don't have a good sense of what are the indicators of heart attack in women. And partly why we don't know that is because the research was done on men by men. And it's not because men inherently are just like, don't care about women who have heart attacks. It's that bringing that perspective and being any kind of human that we are, we sort of have a sense that we reflect the general population, that we understand the issues, and that we don't necessarily, and we just have sort of like the inability to perceive some of the things that are going on. And so that white men doing research on white men investigating heart attack, it's easy to assume that this is going to be generalizable to all other kinds of bodies, because a body is a body, the heart is the heart, and it's easy then to miss things. We have to wonder what more advances would we have in understanding heart attack and understanding the nature of heart attack in women if more women had been involved in that research from the beginning. That they would have, because of their different perspectives, because of their different life experiences, would have been able to bring to that conversation just different points of view, different questions, so that we would have advances in that area because we had diversity in the profession from the beginning. And so we're not looking at diversifying simply so that we can say, check, we've diversified. We want to do that because we are better at solving human problems and dealing with the human issues when we have diversity of humans participating in creating those solutions. So that's one of the things we need to consider. However, we also know, and I'm going to move into the conversation of inclusion, that we know that it's not simply enough to just recruit and hire diverse people. And we've seen that in the technology field a lot, that there have been lots of complaints in computer science, other tech fields, that they can recruit women, they can educate women, and then when women get there, women don't stay. And part of that has to do with when women get there, the culture is not conducive to the well-being of women. The culture may be sexist, may be misogynist, so that women then find themselves in very hostile work environments where they have to endure listening to crude jokes or stories, or be harassed based on their appearance or their clothing. They may also experience not being trusted with big projects, not given opportunities to lead out on projects. They also experience a phenomenon that a lot of women are familiar with, where they say words those words are not heard. And then when a man says the same words, then those words are taken up. And those ideas are taken up. And so women can, that we're finding in tech fields, that women get educated, they get recruited, they get hired, but they are not retained. They don't last in the field. And at first, folks were saying, well, we've got to find out like what's wrong with the women, or what can we do to help women have the kind of like perseverance, or be able to be flexible, be able to handle the environment. The problem with that is that we're not essentially changing the environment to be inclusive of women. We're not saying, you know what, we want women here, and so we're going to have to change the way that we're doing things. We're going to have to change our environment so that women have a safe place to be, they have a place to thrive, they have a place to actually do their work under conditions that actually like support life, right? You know, I can't bring a plant into my home and then just, you know, treat it like maybe, you know, feed and water it like I do a puppy, and then be like mad at the plant if the plant doesn't thrive. I've got to provide the proper conditions. And so that's what inclusion is about. It's saying, okay, we have the diversity, but do we have the proper policies, the kind of culture, the kind of environment that really allows people to be included, allows them to thrive, allows them to fully participate within this organization? And so, and often if a particular community or organization does not have diversity, one of the questions we can ask is, what is going on in this environment that makes it inhospitable by some folks? This is not an environment that is conducive to the thriving of Black people. This is not an environment that is conducive to the thriving of gay people. Trans people are not able to be here and participate fully, so that we then don't blame the people for not being in certain places. We start looking at the environment that we're in and start asking ourselves, what are we doing? What are our policies? What is happening that isn't conducive? So that we think about, you know, one of the analogies that people use is that diversity has to do like with who has been invited to the party, but then once at the party, inclusion determines who are the people who are dancing. You know, are people invited but they're not really dancing? Inclusion has to do with, you know, everybody feeling free and comfortable to dance, and not just like stand there, you know, next to the refreshment counter going, well, I made it here, but I'm not getting on that dance floor. Belonging has to do with even a deeper sense of inclusion, because belonging gets to the point where the people who are there all have a sense of ownership, have a sense that they actually belong in that space. And I think that a lot of us have probably been in a situation where we show up someplace, we're there to participate, but then we also are looking around and thinking, people are going to know that I don't belong here. People are going to know that I'm not one of them. I'm not here as someone who's supposed to be here. Years ago, one of my sons got me involved in rock climbing. And so the first time I went to a rock climbing gym, I just felt like these people are going to kick me out of here. I mean, they're going to take one look at like a middle-aged chubby lady and just say, there's the door. We don't need people like you climbing up the rock wall. And so that might be an inclusion challenge, you know. But it was after being there for a while and being able to learn the lingo, learn the practices, that I could start feeling like I belonged, that I could start, I could feel like, oh, this is my place too. Like I actually belong here. I can come here, I can talk to people, I can ask questions, I can know that this place is a place where I can really be a part of. I can own it in a way, right? I can say that's my rock climbing gym. That's, you know, that I'm part of it. But there are other times where I've been part of groups or been invited to participate in groups where I've never gotten that sense, of like, oh, I really belong here. This is my place too. I really, you know, am part of like the ownership. You know, this is my space. And if we go back to the party analogy, when I say, well, diversity is, you know, getting the invite, and inclusion is being able to dance, but belonging is saying, I'm going to put my mix tape. That's when you say mixtape, you're just like, womp womp, you're from the 80s. But I'm going to put my music, my playlist on the, you know, whatever sound system, and that we're all going to dance to that. That I have then the freedom to even make decisions about the environment itself. It's really difficult to reach belonging. And it's particularly difficult to reach belonging when we have a sense of inclusion, maybe at one level, like I was talking about with teachers, but the leadership looks very different from others. You know, the folks who are then in those positions that would be considered lower positions may not ever get to feel like that that's a place for them, because people above them, people who are running the deal, don't look like them, and then they're not able to enact policies that really create space for them. You know, so if I'm again, if so, let's take a school situation where a lot of schools by decree of state legislators that are primarily white, middle class or higher men, will institute a policy that affects schools that say English only can be spoken in the schools, it can be taught in the schools. Well, now if I'm a student in the school and I'm from Central America, or I'm even from the Navajo Nation. My first language is Dene. It's not English. Or if I'm, you know, a student who is from, you know, even from France, then I can't feel included, because I've already been told that my language is explicitly forbidden. And so there's not a way for me to have a sense of belonging, because my language doesn't even belong there. And so in order to create belonging, we have to do more than just invite people or kind of give them the space to work. That we've got to give them a sense of ownership and a sense of a way of actually shaping the organization, shaping the community, shaping the policies and the culture of the community, so that they have that kind of ownership and the kind of you know, belonging that you would have, like if you were in a family, that you could make a decision and say, yeah, we're not doing tuna fish tonight, or yeah, I want to rearrange the furniture or whatever, because you belong enough to be able to make decisions that affect the larger community as well. So wow, I just said a whole bunch of words. So So if we go back to this idea that there's a person, you know, being hired within an organization to be over diversity, inclusion, and belonging, we can start seeing the challenges that particular person has in being able to understand the many different facets of diversity, being able to understand both the explicit policies and the implicit kind of policies and practices that go on within the organization that either promote diversity and inclusion and belonging, or create obstacles or create barriers to diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And then figure out like how to work with people to make positive change so that, you know, that culture and, you know, just the way that that organization works is different, you know. And so so yeah, I think I'm just going to kind of end it right there, and then I want to entertain questions and have a conversation about the ideas that I've presented.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Dr. Draper. I think I could talk so much about this, but I'll just say that you provided the fresh perspective that I think we needed, because we're always talking about diversity, inclusion, and everything from a business perspective, like who we're hiring and everything, but you provided perspective that just shows so much value to these people that we can have. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead. We have some awesome questions in the chat, so I'm just going to read them to you. Let me see. So the first one we have is from Angela. She had to leave, but she left me a question. She said, how can we find the balance between the fight for diversity and inclusion and then mediocrity? So I don't know exactly what she means.
Mediocrity?
I believe so. I think she said, how can we, I think she's asking, how can we fight more for diversity and inclusion over mediocrity that comes from not having that in our organizations?
Yeah, I think that I've just finished reading a very fabulous book by Ijeoma Oluo called Mediocre. I'll warn you that she likes to use language, but she talks about the challenge of organizations. I mean, where we end up with more mediocrity is because of our propensity to hire or to be led by white men who are underprepared for the jobs that they're taking up. You know, I'm sure a lot of you know this, that, you know, that often a white man will look at a job description and say, oh, I meet about 60% of that. I'm totally going to put my job application in. Whereas a woman or other folks may say, well, I only meet 90% of that. I'm not the person that they're looking for, and they don't apply. And so, so that we know that those sorts of things sort of happen, and that we actually lose quality and we lose excellence because of our focus on or our willingness to hire mediocre white men over other people who are actually more talented, more prepared to take up particular positions. I think there is sometimes the assumption that if we hire people of color, if we hire women, if we hire disabled people, if we hire gay people, we are actually lowering our standards. But that's never shown up in any of the research. That hasn't played out. Where we have seen problems with maintaining white men in positions of power not being a healthy answer to, you know, employment issues.
Awesome, thank you. So it looks like the next question that we have comes from Ula. She says, I'm not sure if this is going to make sense. I read it, it does make sense, Ula. But when we were looking at trying to incorporate diversity into the workplace, how do you make sure that you don't pass up someone more qualified when you're trying to hit a certain percent of diverse people, if that makes sense?
Right. And part of what we have to look at is diversity itself as a part of the qualifications. We set up, you know, we set up certain ideas as the qualifications. You know, have a college degree, have so much work experience, da, 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 da. And generally, when it gets down to 3 or 4 candidates, and we've got some white people in there, we've got some Black people in there, we've got some maybe women, whatever kind of level of diversity in there. At that point, probably all of them are qualified. So that picking an unqualified person isn't really part of the danger, right? And so then we can look at the team that we have and say, yeah, our team would be better served if we had somebody on the team that had a disability to bring that perspective. And so that if we've got 3 or 4 people, that we've already said these people meet the qualifications, and there's one person that in that pile that is also a disabled person, that we might say, well, because of what we know that we need as an organization, it turns out this person is the most qualified because they're bringing a perspective that we don't currently have or that we know that we need. And so they're the most qualified person. Always when we're doing searches, we almost always turn away people who are completely qualified, who would do a good job, but we just don't have enough positions. And so the fear of hiring underqualified people is generally not the problem. It's a problem of saying, what are we doing? What kinds of things do we have here in place? Who are the people we have working here in our team? And how do we create more diversity so that we don't have, I don't need a team of 10 people who all know the same thing, have had the same experiences, have the same perspective. That doesn't help with the conversation. I need to think about, how do I have someone who bring some diversity to that conversation. I don't know if I answered the question or if I just said a lot of words. It can go.
I think you answered. I think you did answer. I love what you said about seeing diversity as a qualification rather than like a standard to meet, because I think it makes it so much more positive and like adding to the team rather than just meeting some goals. So thank you so much for that. This next question comes from Nakia. She says, how can we include others / create organizations with vast diversity if many of these factors are so difficult to see or notice right off the bat?
Yeah, that is a good question. And we may not have created a safe enough space where people are willing to reveal those things, or they don't feel like they ought to, or they need to. This is the case, obviously, for LGBTQ people, that we may not have created a space that is safe for a gay person or bisexual person or transgender person to actually reveal themselves, for fear that they're going to be rejected, ridiculed, excluded, judged, or whatever. And so the same thing goes with people with hidden disabilities, if that's mental illness or chronic pain or chronic illness, that they may think, well, I don't want to reveal that because what if that actually hurts my chances of being hired? What if people have particular biases against me that then don't allow me to be able to be hired? They have a sense that I won't be able to do a good job. And so I'll keep that hidden and just keep doing my work. One of my kids is colorblind, and severe color blindness. He only wears black, mostly because then he knows that he's not going to make a fashion faux pas in terms of how he's dressed himself. Meanwhile, he's an industrial engineer, industrial designer, which means that he just designs things. He designs watches, knives, shoes, cell phone covers, all kinds of things. And in that design work, he naturally has to do color work. Everything that's designed also has a color to it, so I've got this like beautiful red water bottle. Someone had to pick that particular red versus another red, what else? My glass has got color in it. You know, everything is designed with color. And so, and yet he has been able to, despite that disability, to do really excellent color work. And it could be even because of that disability, because he takes his work and he thinks about color. Because he's not able to perceive color the way most people do, he then has to rely on different ways of getting to color. So he'll look at a color chart. He'll know that if he moves horizontally along that chart, that some colors will go together. He knows if he moves vertically along the chart, other things will happen. And so he's essentially choosing color based on sort of mathematical principles about how color works. And so he is often called upon to do the color design for a lot of things. And I ask him, do you ever tell people that you're colorblind? He can't often, when he's even selected 3 colors for a family of items, that he maybe doesn't really even perceive the differences between those colors. And he says, I'm not comfortable letting people know that because I don't want them to think that I would not be good at this, even though somehow he's turned that disability into a superpower in his area. But the bias might be in industrial design that a colorblind person wouldn't be well suited for this position. And so that is something that he keeps under wraps because of the bias he's afraid that he'll get from others. And so when people don't reveal themselves, we have to then again look at ourselves, look at the environment that we're creating to say, what are we doing that doesn't make it safe for folks to reveal things about themselves, for fear that we'll judge, we'll shun, or whatever. So again, I mean, I think that what you're asking, Nakia, is really difficult, but it does really hinge on what things are we doing to make the spaces around us safe for individuals to reveal themselves.
Awesome. I love that story. I think that was a really good illustration of, once again, perspective that diversity in our teams offers us, because it didn't come easy to him at first, and it probably still doesn't come necessarily as easy as like a person that isn't colorblind, but because of that, he is so powerful in a team. So thank you. This next question comes from Christina. She says, do you personally feel that the organization should enforce teams and groups to be diverse, or should it be rather be on a case-by-case basis? And what is the pros and cons of both?
Yeah, I mean, I could see, within an organization, if you had an all-female team doing, some sort of work, I could see where that could be really powerful. We know that if we have only one woman working on a team, and some of this research came out of BYU as well, that the woman on the team may not still feel that she has the safety to speak up and to really assert her ideas. And so it may be useful to have an all-woman team look at particular issues. It may be, we may want to consider, depending on the problem we're trying to solve, we may say, yeah, let's put a team of all, people over 65, because we think that is going to provide us some insight. I mean, we may not want to do that permanently, in any sort of division of our organization, but for some problems, we may want to say, let's have maybe kind of a less diverse team look at this particular issue. So I think that's really contextual. It really just depends.
Awesome. And that study that you actually referenced that came from BYU Magazine, we had an event here with Women in Leadership with the researchers in that article. So it was a great article, scary article, but great. The research. Yeah. It was not fun to read, but it was great that we have that information now.
Yeah, it's good that the information's getting out.
Definitely. So this next question comes from John, He says, aloha, Dr. Draper.
Aloha.
We as students in BYU Hawaii are used to diversity as we study with over 70 students or 70 countries represented by students all over the world. He says, my question is, how can we prepare ourselves that after we graduate and leave BYU Hawaii to promote diversity all over the world, especially when we're going to organizations where diversity is not necessarily promoted or as prevalent?
Yeah, I mean, this can be really challenging. I mean, there are a couple of things. First of all, I think that if you are a person that you know is going to bring a diverse perspective, either because of your race, your geography, your nationality, your language, your sexuality, gender, if you know that you're bringing that those sort of differences to an organization, I think it is useful to understand that you are bringing a quality, you're bringing experience, you're bringing a background that is needed and valued. It might not be like explicitly valued where you're being hired, but that you understand that you are bringing value added, and that's often difficult to remember. It's often it's often a challenge because the people around you may not very much may not note your value. The other thing that can be challenging is that if you're the only person of color, if you're the only gay person, the only bisexual person, the only woman, it may be difficult to be kind of that solo voice that is bringing up issues of diversity, asking about those issues on a regular basis, reviewing policy and saying, oh yeah, we've got this policy, but this may actually hinder women from being able to apply, or this may really hinder the inclusion of people who speak English as an additional language, and so that do we want to reconsider this policy, this position that we're taking, and it can be really taxing to be the only person who is doing that. But because organizations are, I think, trying, or at least pretending to try to make these kinds of changes, there should be another person, at least in the organization, that you could go to say, yeah, I want to help with this. I want, let me know how I can be helpful, so that you're not sort of that lone voice, but that you can be part of that change. I think while doing that, it's important to understand that that is important labor that ought to be compensated as well, that you shouldn't be just doing that at your sort of expense, as your weekend hobby, that when you're doing that work, that you can expect from the people who are employing you or engaging with you, that you can expect to be compensated for that, and say, yeah, I'm bringing this knowledge, I'm bringing this understanding, and I expect that that what I'm bringing is valuable, and I don't necessarily want to take up that additional labor, that additional work, without also it being recognized and valued and compensated. So, I mean, that takes a lot of, you got to build up some self-confidence, but I think that we've got to really do that for ourselves and for the other people in the organization who are looking to us for that kind of leadership.
Awesome. I think that was an amazing note to end on, because I think that was just a really good summation of everything we talked about. Thank you so much, Dr. Draper. It's been awesome to hear from you. Thank you, everybody here, for joining our event today. And we invite, of course, everybody here that maybe isn't a BYU-MS member to join us. But I'll go ahead, give the closing prayer, and then we'll be good to go. Our dear Father, we're thankful for Thee and for His day and for this opportunity we had this day to hear from Dr. Draper. And we ask You that as her amazing words resonate with us, that we'll please be able to use them wisely, and that we'll please be able to be good influences in the world. And we love Thee and say things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I appreciate
Mahalo, Dr.
Mahalo.
Draper.
Dr. Draper.
Thank you.